Hey everyone, I think we are live. I'm delighted that you could all join us for Better Reading's Facebook Live event. A big thanks to Cheryl and everyone at Better Reading for giving us the opportunity to be here, meeting all you lovely viewers, and getting to talk about books, our favourite thing. My name's Jo Mackay. I'm head of local publishing at HQ HarperCollins, coming to you from a very chilly Sydney. And I'm very excited to be talking to author Robbi Neal, who I believe is coming to us from Victoria. Is that right, Robbi?
I'm actually coming to you from an even chillier Ballarat.
Ballarat, how appropriate. And we'll get to why that is so appropriate any second now.
70s.
We're going to be talking about Robbi's wonderful book, The Secret Life of Connie Starr. Let me just hold that up so you can see that beautiful book. This is Robbi's fourth book. She's also written the highly praised memoir Sunday Best, as well as After Before Time and The Art of Preserving Love, written as Ada Langton. And if that isn't enough, she is also a gifted artist. I think you've got a virtual exhibition on right now, haven't you, Robbi?
I have, yeah, at Red Dot Fine Art Gallery in Singapore.
Red Dot, that's right. I'm just seeing this. Oh, hello, Wendy. She's saying, hello, good evening, Wendy. Good evening, Jessica, ladies from Camperdown. Jane, nice to see you. Jane loved your book, Robbi, she's saying. Sharon, look, I've got my scroll bars gone bong, hang on. Wendy, I've gone Wendy. Yep, all right, I'm on top of my comments right now, just keeping track of those. Readers, reviewers, and other authors have heaped glowing praise on this book, and it is a remarkable book. It is ambitious and complex and insightful, and it intertwines numerous stories of Australian lives, particularly those of two neighbouring families from before World War II and beyond, at a time when Australia was going through so much social change. I can see people from Ballarat dropping in there, Christine. And it really recreates with great immediacy a world that is now lost to us, I think. It swirls together so many different elements, from shoes and polio and lemon trees and rivers and death and life. It's all melded together in this very beautiful, luminous work of art. I'm just going to quote something that another author has said about your book, because I know that's high praise, isn't it, Robbi, when you have praise from another author. Victoria Perman, who wrote The Nurse's War, said, "A perfect novel, poetic, evocative, and hopeful. Your heart will break and then heal for Connie Starr." That's a lovely endorsement, isn't it, Robbi?
It's beautiful.
So, Robbi, the book is set in Ballarat from the 1930s through to the 1950s. Why did you choose this place in particular to write about?
Ballarat all the time?
Ballarat and the time, I guess. Time and place.
Well, The Art of Preserving Love is set in Ballarat, and I love Ballarat, and I've lived here for over 20 years. My mother grew up here. She went to Dana Street Primary School, and Ballarat people will know where that is, and she went to Ballarat High School, and my grandfather was the minister at the Dawson Street Baptist Church, which is now a house. And look, I just love Ballarat, and I once read a book that was set in Australia and written by a person in England who'd never been to Australia, who started talking about the autumnal colours of Australian wood. I just kind of, okay, I'm going to write about the place that I know best, and that for me is Ballarat. And, you know, because I love Ballarat, it was just easy to do. So,
yeah, so it's such a big part of your history and your background.
It is, yeah, it is. And The Art of Preserving Love was set in Ballarat during the First World War, and I thought, well, why not set this one during the Second World War? And I don't plan a book. I wait until the first sentences come to me, and the first sentences that came to me in this book were about the Connie bringing the war with her, and just that idea of a mother feeling that her child could be so destructive that she could bring an entire world war with her when she was born. I just love that because, you know, like I'm a mother of 5, and I think all of us at some time feel that about our children at some point, or one of our children at some point.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I also felt for Connie that, you know, her mother felt this way, that, you know, how that would impact her. And so that was the starting point. And so I thought, well, you know, I've done the First World War, why not do the Second World War?
So novelist, artist, and mother of 5. That's pretty impressive. I don't know how you managed that. Or getting people coming in from Meredith is on a giant beanbag beside her Kunara, looking forward to finding out about the book. And Wendy's from Wagga Wagga. And Ilona says, love your book. Loved your book. And also we're moving to Ballarat on Friday. Yeah, so there you go. You might be able to bump into each other in the street. So the Second World War this took place, you know, in history. Obviously, it starts with Connie's birth in, you know, 1934, I think it is, and we go all the way through to the 1950s. But of course, the Second World War does loom really large in the book. And is there any, I mean, obviously it was a very dramatic time for many places around the world, but is there a particular reason you decided to use the Second World War, this particular historical period, as your backdrop for the action?
Look, it really wasn't. It just started, as I said, with those first few sentences about Connie. And I don't love research. I only really do research when I have to. I'm very story focused, so I stopped.
I'm getting from that the way you said all your books are set in Ballarat now. Both those books are set in Ballarat. Yeah.
I stop to do research when I have to, but then I do find it really fascinating. Like, I was just fascinated by the fact that rationing didn't end until the 1950s. And of course, one really important thing that happened in Ballarat during the war was that 3,000 American boys came here. And there's actually a wonderful book about it called, I think it's Overpaid, Oversexed, and Over Here. And, you know, it's just a little...
Something very similar was said in the UK about Americans. Yeah.
I think, you know, just that title alone tells you the impact that these 3,000 Americans had on the tiny town of Ballarat, because Ballarat was 40 to 50,000 people in that time during the Second World War. So
yeah,
the population increased by 10%, and they were all boys, you know.
Yeah, so a phenomenal, like a huge social change, really. Linda Sanders just come in and said she's halfway through the book and thoroughly enjoying it, and she's all the way from Rockhampton. I mean, many of the characters in the book are damaged by the war. I mean, I found so many of the characters in the book really recognizable, Robbi. I mean, one I really related to was Birdie, who is a stoical, fierce character who, you know, adores her children, has some loss in the book. She actually really reminded me of my grandmother, who also lived through the war, but in the UK, never had much of anything, part of a very close-knit community and family. And I think that's a really big thing about the book, is a sense of close community. You know, everybody's in everybody else's business, but very tough and stoic, you know, and that generation is gone now, and my mother's generation's disappearing as well. So I really enjoyed seeing a character like that brought to life. You know, there's a lot to be said for stoicism. There's a lot of really tough things that happen in the book. You know, illness, war, violence, betrayal. What made you decide to explore that kind of trauma?
Look, I feel like I've had a lot of trauma in my life. I had, you know, a childhood that was rotten enough to be able to write about it. I had cancer, and I was told I had 3 months to live, which is what got me starting in writing. I had a very unhappy first marriage. I have been assaulted, and that was really traumatic. And so, I've been a struggling single mother, and I think that I'm not alone in that. I think a lot of us have you know, trauma in our lives that we don't necessarily talk to people about, that we don't really know about each other. But, we all, I think a lot of us have that sense of being a bit bruised and having to find a way to get through it and keep on going in life, I suppose I just really wanted to write about people that were real and to treat them with respect, and to people who do have trauma.
Yeah.
But to focus on the fact that often what is the most vulnerable thing about us, each person, is often what our strongest point is about ourselves. Like often
Yeah.
our vulnerability is also our strength, and also to sort of focus on how people work through trauma to find a place of healing and of being able to go on with life. And for me, that's for me personally, I do suffer a lot of depression and a lot of anxiety and a lot of feeling, am I really okay? And
Yeah.
and the way that I get through it is by focusing on the really small things in life that are really good. Like, that my garden looks good even though I completely and utterly neglect it, or my daughter might ring me up and we might spend half an hour on the phone with each other, or, I make a batch of rhubarb gin and it tastes good. Like,
But you have Handley by your side there.
my rhubarb gin, homemade.
Yeah.
I think, or somebody's nice to you when you're not expecting it, in just a small way. Like, it's those little things in life that I think are actually really important and that enable us to hold our heads above the water and keep
Yeah.
going. And
Those little golden moments and where life is just good in the
yeah,
midst of all that's happening.
that's where you find God. Like, I don't know if I believe in God anymore, but if I do believe in God, for me, God is found in the very small things in life, not the big things.
Yes, I think that makes perfect sense. And I think that emotional depth is really there in the book, and the sense of light and shade, is there in the book. Of there's some such dark things that happen. Mothers lose their children. There's abuse, etc., and it's really really painful. But at the same time, it's an extremely joyful book. I found a very hopeful book. I don't know if those of you who've read it have thought that too. I see some questions coming in, and I'd like to talk about your characters in a minute, Robbi. But this one is really quite a nice question from Sharon Hill, and I'll come back to the cover too, Sharon. You're asking, it's a beautiful cover. We'll come back to that. But how do you choose your characters' names?
Well, I do internet searches of names until I find the one that I think is right for that particular character. So
Starr is a pretty laden name, isn't it? Really, in a way. Yeah.
Sorry?
Starr, Connie Starr it's quite a laden name, it carries with it.
I came up with the Starr because, she likes to look through to the heavens, and, my working title for the book was The Celestial World of Connie Starr. So
Okay.
I got the surname Starr. So, and I thought, well, she's born into a religious family, they're going to give her a religious name. So, Faith was sort of too much, but Constance, which she's not, I thought would be fitting for her. Yeah.
Obviously Connie is one of the main characters in the book, and we meet her from the very first page. I think Robbi and I were just discussing whether just before we came on, whether it would be lovely for Connie, for Robbi, calling Robbi Connie, to read that first page where we first meet Connie Starr, because it's such a remarkable moment when you first meet her. Would you be happy to do that, Robbi?
Oh, absolutely. If people would like it, I don't want to.
Yeah, I'm sure people would like it. I'll go and look at the comments and tell you whether people will like it. Wendy's saying you have a great bank of experience to write from. I'll come to her question in a minute too, but yeah, we'd love to hear that. Meet Connie for the first time.
All right. Well, this is from the prelude. Ballarat, Monday the 2nd of April, 1934. I've got to take my glasses off to read it.
Fair enough.
Connie Starr was always a difficult child. Her mother, Flora, would tell everyone that when Connie was born, she brought the war with her. This wasn't actually true, as Connie was born on the first Monday in April 1934 at 12 noon exactly, a good 5 years and 5 months before Australia was to plunge itself into the Second World War. But Flora knew as soon as Connie entered the world and opened her lungs to scream that there was more chaos in the world than before, and that the chaos Connie had brought would work its damage until the day Connie left the world, which she would not do until her 92nd year, though Connie would spend the last 32 of those years declaring to her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren that this would be her last Christmas.
That's fabulous. That is something my grandmother used to say. I've not long for this world, she'd say, for the last 25 years of her life. Yeah, I think she's a remarkable character. And of course, if you've read the book, you probably know that Connie has a very rich inner life and a very rich visual life, and she talks to angels and demons and sees people that other people may not see. And what did you have a particular inspiration for Connie, Robbi?
Well, when I started, I didn't. But it then became very clear to me that Connie was inspired by my mother. My mother was not a great mother to have for a young girl growing up. She was diagnosed just before she passed away with borderline personality disorder. And that was 6 weeks before she passed. The doctors came to me and said, "We've diagnosed your mother," as though they'd achieved something miraculous. And she was in a hospice by this stage. They were, "We've diagnosed your mother and we're going to start some treatment. We've diagnosed her with borderline personality disorder." And my response was, "Where were you when I was 15 and needed you? And why would you start her on treatment when she's got weeks left to live?" But she had a very poor grasp of truth, of fact, really, not so much truth, but of fact. And it would come out all the time. And if you said to my mother, Kevin Rudd is the Prime Minister at the moment, say, "Oh, well, yes, I used to work for Kevin Rudd and I was his private secretary," and it would be completely untrue. And if you questioned her on it, she would dig herself deeper and go, "Well, I was his closest friend and he took me on all of his trips." And there would be this wonderful story about her and Kevin Rudd that you would know would be completely untrue. And yeah, she would just dig herself right in. And so there was a point at which that was frustrating, for me as her daughter. But there was a point at which I began to kind of think, that she had a great ability to tell stories around her life, and she had a traumatic life. And I think that was one of the ways that she coped with her life, was to create these other worlds.
So why it wasn't... So why it might not have been true, it was still very kind of entertaining from your perspective, or not? Or was it disconcerting?
It wasn't to me as her daughter at the time, because I was too young to really understand what was really going on and how I knew about the experiences that she'd had, but I didn't know how they were impacting her as my mother and in her raising of me. But, look, and some of the stories were really funny. So, she gave me a silver teapot just before she died and told me it had been passed down through the family from King George V. And when I turned it upside down, still had an op shop sticker on the bottom of it.
Oh,
And,
no.
and I was like, you had to smile, because I realized in that moment that she just had a great ability to kind of create worlds. And while sometimes that was destructive, sometimes it wasn't. And I think a lot of the time it was for her own survival. So, I realized that, she had inspired Connie. But then also, I think that for every author, when you write a book, you write yourself into every single character as well. And I was talking to someone just the other day and saying, how I've often felt very separated from the world, with neurodivergence and a very religious upbringing and a very violent upbringing. And they said to me, "Oh, so you sit up in the lemon tree and watch." And I just kind of went, "Oh, yeah, perhaps I do." So,
which is of course what Connie does in the book, separate from the world, viewing it. Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting.
I think there is, the idea that you put yourself into every single character has some truth to it.
I think one of the central messages in the book, and I think we've talked about this before, Robbi, is that difference, the theme of difference in the book, and that it should be that actually being different might be something to be celebrated, rather than even in that era when being different was sort of even possibly more frowned upon than it is now. Was that a theme you were sort of consciously going for in the book, or was it just?
I think it was subconscious to a certain point, but I think there was a point where it did become like, oh, this is what I'm writing. And I think, personally for me, it's a very important thing that we celebrate difference and appreciate difference in each other. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, Jane has come in, Jane Tara, and is asking, can you tell us about your writing process or your work day? And are you working on another novel at the moment? Which I can take that one if you want. But yeah.
I've actually got 2 more novels that I've finished that are sitting there waiting. And I have been concentrating on my painting for the last few months because I've got this exhibition on at Red Dot Gallery. I'm actually a really disciplined writer. So when I'm writing a new book, I treat it like a job. I get up, I have my pot of tea, and I go out to write, hopefully by 9 o'clock. And I write until I've written 1,500 words. And that might take me an hour, or it might take me 4 hours. But I keep going until I've written 1,500 words for that day, and that's when I finish. So
that's impressive indeed.
I do that 5 or 6 days a week when I'm writing. So I'm really, really disciplined about it because I'm naturally lazy, and if I wasn't, I just wouldn't ever do anything except sit around drinking tea until it's gym time.
And do you go back and redraft, Robbi?
I do once. So what I do is I basically try to write a chapter each day in those 1,500 words. And then the next day I will read over what I wrote the day before and make any changes I want to make, and then move on to the next chapter and write the next chapter. And I keep moving forward every day like that.
Yes.
Otherwise, I think you can get bogged in constantly rewriting and revising. And
yes, that's often a problem with editors who become writers, is they constantly revise themselves so they can't write anything. Well, there's a lovely question a little earlier from Sharon Hill, which says it's a beautiful cover. Did you have much input in the cover?
No, I didn't have any. However, I got shown the cover and got told, "Isn't this beautiful?" And I was like, "Yep, it is."
That is not entirely true, because I'm her publisher, and we have a lot to do with the cover. And Robbi sent me some of her paintings quite early on. They're beautiful, joyous, happy, lovely not abstract, really, semi-abstract. How would you describe them? Expressionistic, Robbi?
Yeah.
I'm bad at labels with painting, but they're gorgeous. And it was after we saw her paintings that we suddenly clicked about the cover. So while Robbi might say she didn't have a say in the cover, she actually did, because the colorways in this were somehow very Robbi. And the lemon tree, of course, is inescapable in the book, isn't it? Robbi, as you've just described, it's where Connie goes to sit. It's her safe place where she talks to angels and watches the world. So the lemon tree, but it's a very painterly cover, and I think that reflects Robbi. So I beg to differ, Robbi, on that one.
I didn't know having input, but it's a beautiful cover. So
Sally Smith just said the cover is lovely. So thank you, Sally. Cover, one thing that I've noticed readers, and it's been coming up in the reviews, which you don't read, Robbi, and I encourage that you don't, because it's sometimes, you're getting amazing reviews. But one thing that readers have commented upon and that they really enjoy is the chapter headings in the book. To explain for those of you who might not have read the book yet, each chapter has a short heading, and they nearly always begin with the word when, don't they, Robbi? So when Nero keeps his lions at bay, when Joseph catches his reflection, when Connie tells a fib, when the man suffers an invasion, when Birdie starts it. Let's go back to when Birdie had high hopes. So they're all little short chapter headings, which I really enjoy as well. What was the inspiration for those?
Well, two things really. I just really like those sorts of really old books that have those sorts of headings. I just love them myself. So, I like to use them, but also they're very helpful for me as a writer to remember what the core part of that chapter is, what the core thing is that's going to happen. So
is it shorthand for you to remember?
For me, because it's quite a large manuscript, quite a big book. It was really hard for me to keep it all in my head at different times, and so it helps me to kind of go, to know what's going to happen and where I'm going, and it helps me to kind of look back. Like, I don't come up with the headings until after I've written the chapter. I don't have the headings first. I have the headings last, and I kind of think, what was the core thing that happened in this, and that's where the heading comes from.
It works beautifully as a kind of little hook for the reader, when you're reading it, guys, and you sort of think, oh, what's that going to be about? What do they mean? And, you're into that chapter. Wendy, you mentioned earlier you have a great bank of experience to write from. This is Wendy Kendall. Has this been helpful in making sense of working through some of the things you've been through? Like, and do you leave those things behind? Like, is writing a kind of therapy in that sense, I guess? Or
what you're asking is it cathartic? And for me, no, it's not. Like, when I was in my 20s is when I really worked through a lot of the things from my childhood that had been very traumatic. And, I was a mess in my 20s. I would have a fight with my ex-husband and he would have no clue what was going on because I'd be behind a door in a dark room in fetal position, like an absolute mess just from some insignificant fight with him. I think I worked through a lot in my 20s. So I certainly draw on my experiences to kind of understand how the characters might feel and what they're going through. But it's not cathartic at all. If it was cathartic, it wouldn't be publishable because it was full of anger, particularly for my ex.
Yeah.
So,
well, I'm sure there's a lot of people who would know what that means, how that feels to a degree. But look, I mean, it is an amazing, profound, and beautiful book. And the comments that have been coming through from all the lovely viewers here about how much they're enjoying reading it, if they're still reading it, and how much you know, how much they love it. So thank you, everyone, because that's really lovely for an author to be able to hear that from readers. And we're just reaching the end of our time. Can you believe? I can't believe how quickly this half hour goes whenever we do better reading. But beautiful cover for a very beautiful book, and a very lovely author. Thank you so much, Robbi, for coming and having a chat. Thank you, all the viewers, for coming along. It's been really enjoyable. And everyone's thanking us back. Isn't that nice? All right. Well, we will bid you good night. I hope you have a pleasant evening wherever you are. And all goes well with you guys.